some people saying, you seem so calm and serene and peaceful. How is that happening? And here's something I realize, always having been the helper, is, and I kind of see you this way also. I don't exist in my present or in my future. What I am is that I am empathic catalyst for others, helping them go from A to wherever they want to land in their future, helping them get there in whatever way possible. Don't charge for it. I probably mentor 45 people, all free, but I get something from it. The mutual regard is amazing, but literally I don't exist in my mind in the present. I live to learn and I live to give.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It's my pleasure to have Mark Goulston back with us. Mark was a previous guest, and this time this is going to be a very different episode. Mark is a long-term friend, and he has a terminal illness, and he's joining us because, in his words, he's dying to tell us what approaching death is teaching him about living, that living never did. And he's also the author or co-author of 10 books in 43 languages. And he was a suicide prevention specialist, and none of his patients died by suicide. Mark, it's so great to have you back.
Well, it's good to be with you, Stephan. If I get emotional, I'm just going to let it flow. But hopefully, the effect it's had on people who care about me is it's not a burden. So we'll see where this goes. I was recently watching a famous video clip of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. I think it was Kara Swisher's show. And, it was towards the end of Steve Jobs' life. And he looks over at Bill Gates and he said, he says, I remember a lot of Beatles songs and Bob Dylan songs. And he looks over at Bill Gates and he says, the two of us have memories longer than the road that stretches out ahead. And then Steve Jobs realized what he said and he got choked up. And Kara Swisher says, well, let's end it on there. And I feel that's true with you and me. We have memories longer than the road that stretches out ahead for me.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that my understanding of how the universe works, that informs what I'm about to say now, that it's no coincidence that we're friends and that we seemingly randomly met each other at a baseball game in New York in, 2011 or something like that. I see the divine setup of things in so many things, and I see it in this and in our relationship. And it was I'm sure you remember this, it was in a, what do you call those things? Like a box, like one of those
in the New York Yankees. New York Yankees suite. Yeah.
A suite, yes. That's how much I know about baseball and going to baseball games. I think I've gone to 3 in my life. And that's how we met. So it's a divine setup. All of this is in my view. So what would be some of the most divinely set up circumstances and experiences that you've had in recent times in relation to what you're going through now?
Well, I'm stockpiling a bunch of videos. I'm not sure what I'll do with them. I'm up to 25 episodes, and they're called I'm Dying to Tell You. And each one will say, hey, I'm dying to tell you, this is Dr. Mark Goulston, and I'm not dying soon, but sooner than I planned. And every day something reveals itself to me. So the first episode is called Michelangelo Dying. And what I talk about is how it is said that Michelangelo said, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved till I set it free. And for me, it's, I saw what's important in life and I carved away everything that wasn't important. And it's amazing how many things in our life are unimportant. And I mean, they can be exciting. And look, I know when people are younger than me, I'm 75, you got to make a living, you get excited and all that. And I'm not putting that down. But for me, what's important is how deeply and close you can connect to the people who care about you and return the caring. And there's something really sort of special about that. Another episode was let people care about you. And today, later, I'm going to record another episode about how unabashed vulnerability heals both parties. Because what's happened is when I run into someone who cares about me, like you do, I start to get emotional, but hopefully it's not boo-hoo, poor me emotional. I just let the caring in and I get emotional and I talk through it and my eyes are tearing up as they'll probably do sometimes here. And what I realize, because when it first happened, I got really embarrassed and I apologized and I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't want to burden you. And what's happened since then, and now you might say to me, because I love your humor, well, it's a burden to me, Mark. But what's happened with the people?
You know me better than that. That's not a joke that I would say. It's like if a joke is at somebody else's expense, or there's even a chance that there could be a tinge of truth in it, that's uncomfortable or unpleasant. That's not really a joke. That's just mean. So yeah, I only make jokes that are with love.
Yeah. I'm going to be presenting at this our community medal about this, and it'll be interesting because we both know some people who are uncomfortable with vulnerability. So there's no telling what they'll do. But I'm going to still share whatever I'm going to share. But what I realized about letting people care about you, I've always been uncomfortable letting anyone care about me because I'm a doctor by training. I'm a therapist. I'm a caregiver. And so I would always push it away. If someone, a patient, would say something, grateful to me, I'd say, no, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just so glad that you're in a better place. And I would just push away letting anyone care about me because I felt it would be a burden to them and inappropriate. But what's happened is as I've had these conversations and I feel someone caring about me, I get emotional. And when I've apologized for it, people have said, it's not a burden, Mark, it's a gift. I said, how is it a gift? And they say, this is one of the most real conversations I've had in a long time. and then so what I'm going to talk about when I do this episode is what does real mean? And I think what happens is I surprise people who don't often run on oxytocin. I mean, oxytocin is what causes emotional intimacy. And I think when someone is unabashedly vulnerable without laying it on you like, oh, help me, help me, help me, but they're just unabashedly vulnerable. And if you perceive that person to not be laying it on you and you admire that person, I think it just calms the conversation down. And I was thinking recently, I mean, this is probably a bridge too far. I have another episode called The 7-Year Itch 2.0. It'll be an article in Newsweek. And a lot of younger generation don't know, but there was a play and a movie, one with Marilyn Monroe and her dress being blown up, called The 7-Year Itch. And basically it said that after about 7 years of marriage, romance goes away. And I've been drilling into that because I have young children who, not young children, they're 41 and 38. And they each have 2 children. And I'm worried about the 7-year itch because there's a phenomena that happens that when a husband and wife, fall in love, and it's pretty exciting, especially if you're an entrepreneur, it's like another exciting thing. But then what happens is when the entrepreneur turns his or her attention, and let's call it a male, to being an entrepreneur, the wife tries to stay excited, but when the wife becomes a mother and she starts feeding that infant and she starts looking into the eyes of that unabashedly vulnerable infant, and after a month or two, that infant starts to smile when he or she's feeding, there is a surge of oxytocin. There's a surge of emotional connection that is beyond what that mother could have ever imagined. And what happens is she begins to see the entrepreneurial excitement of her husband as a little bit juvenile, because she's so focused on this connection that she didn't know was possible. And the more she focuses on that connection, because it's mesmerizing, often the more the husband feels a little bit marginalized, but he throws himself into his entrepreneurial business. But then what happens is the mother needs him to participate. The mother needs him to stop being distracted when he's home. And in a little while, the mother also displaces her anger at her infant, who's not feeding, not sleeping, who's exhausting the mother, who may also be working. And the mother starts to displace her anger at her husband. So frequently the husband feels he can't do anything right, and she jumps on him. Furthermore, if that woman is working, she has to hide her joy at being a mother, because she has to be so excited, when the CEO lands a 7-figure deal and there's a bunch of high fives, and she has to join in. She can't be Debbie Downer. And so she fakes it. And so the combination of that, not being able to really express the joy that she feels about being a mother at work, and also displacing the anger she feels at her child on her husband, what happens is the husband starts to, feel lousy. And then in about 7 years of marriage, if they've had a child, let's say the child's 3 or 4 years old, the child is starting to say, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And so the dad connects with the child and feels this wonderful relationship. And if they're able to afford it, when the dad goes on business trips with clients or associates, and he meets a woman on the trip, and the woman just looks at him, looks into his eyes, and thinks the world of him the way his wife once did when they first met, there's a real contrast. Geez, out in the world, everything I do isn't wrong. And when I come home, everything is wrong. And what I'm worried, and I'm seeing it, is that a lot of marriages are going to start ending, because if the marriage can afford a divorce, the husband's going to say, you don't like me. I apparently don't like you. I don't do anything right in your eyes. I love our kids. Well, it'll be an amicable divorce. And why don't we just go our separate ways, because we both deserve to be happy? And then there's going to be a divorce. And often that wife, mother, will be left, with those kids. and they'll maybe do shared parenting. But the wife, mother left with those kids, may find it difficult, getting remarried, bringing kids into the next marriage. And then the husband maybe marries that person he met on the road who adores him. But if she's young enough, she says, I'd like to have a child. And then it's rinse and repeat. So I know that's long winded, but I'm just seeing it so clearly. So did you track with any of that? Did that make any sense to you at all?
I think that's plausible. It's feasible. It's potentially even likely, but it's not been my experience. I'm 7 years into my marriage, and we've never been closer.
You're an unusual man, Stephan. I mean that in the best positive way. I think you have the capacity for deep thoughtfulness, deep curiosity, deep desire to, if something is not going right, to drill down uh, and figure what that is, to communicate respectfully, and to be able to be someone who can encourage and facilitate your wife respectful conversation. And I believe all of those are true. And if someone's listening in, I think the majority of people will say, that ain't my marriage.
But it could be, right? It could be.
It should be. It not only could be, it should be. It should be.
Well, you know what is it, Marshall Rosenberg would say from nonviolent communication? Should is the most violent word in the English language. So I don't know if it should or shouldn't. I just think it's an opportunity. If it's not currently and you want it to be, you can create that reality. And it's not like you're changing others, but when you change yourself and you change how you relate to everything and everybody, not just your spouse, you change the environment. I think you change timelines, you jump timelines. When you raise your vibration, you get a different movie script and you get to play the lead actor of a much better movie.
I agree with you. Let's split the difference. I love language. Okay, delete should be, uh, take into consideration could be, and let's settle on ought to be.
Okay. All right.
So one of the other episodes is I'm blessed that I've been married 45 years. We got a good marriage, and I get to see my grown children with my grandchildren every day. So I have four grandchildren, 4.5 and under. And my wife was right. Let's keep the house because there's a pool there. And if we moved into something less than that, the grandchildren would be restless and they'd be chomping at the bit after 15 minutes. But now, they come over, they stay for an hour and a half, and I adore them. I wasn't close geographically to my grandparents, and and I try to get home when they're there. And here's something that I've discovered. So when I get home, and my wife and my two daughters and four grandchildren are in the kitchen, uh, there is I am not excluded, but I'm not included. Nobody looks at me. Nobody asks me anything. Uh, if I try to say something, they'll look at me like, what? Because, I'm not really into the details of my wife and my daughter's lives. And my wife is an amazing grandmother. Uh, and occasionally the grandchildren will be playing and they'll look at me. And there was one occasion, and here was the breakthrough, where, no one was looking at me, and my daughters are talking, multitasking, juggling things. And I picked up my cell phone and I looked at it. And even though no one was looking at me, they all looked at me with the stink eye, like, what are you looking at your phone for? And so it was like, well, geez, uh, apparently I'm in the space and I'm not allowed to be preoccupied. And I said this once and only once because it was pathetic. It was like, well, nobody's including me, so I just thought I'd check my phone. And they looked at me like, really? And then, so the next step was I put the phone down and, and I just sat there patiently because I love looking at my family, holding court, even though I'm being ignored. And I thought, that's pretty crappy too. And then I had this notion, I'm not, I'm not going to think about what's on my phone. I'm not going to think about who's trying to reach me. I'm not going to think about what project I'm involved with. I'm going to totally rid my mind of everything. And I'm going to wait for my grandchildren to look at me, and I'm going to bathe them in utter delight. So on the occasion they look at me and they look into my eyes like I'm looking into your eyes through my camera, utter delight is, and I'm trying to do it with everyone. So Stephan, I'm so glad to see you again. We don't connect that often, and we should, because I've known you for so long, and I've known about your journey, and it's always meant a lot to me. And so I bathe my children in utter delight. And then they, look away, but then they take a second helping of it. Like, what? Because they don't often get that utter delight because my children adore them, but they're checking boxes, get in the car, finish your lunch, get dressed, go to sleep. A lot of parenting, unfortunately, can be transactional. And so every time my grandchildren look at me for that second helping, I feel the healthiest emotionally that I can feel. There's zero ego going on inside my head. There's zero preoccupation. It's total undivided attention and delight. And so now what I'm trying to do is bathe the world in that. So if I go to a restaurant and the waiter or waitress waits on us, and if he or she looks at me and says anything else, I look at their name tag and I say, yeah, Nancy, one other thing. And then she'll look at me and I'll say, Nancy, hey, thank you. And I look into her eyes and she goes, oh, okay. And sometimes I watch them as they leave the table, and it's almost like their shoulders will shake because they're thinking, what was that? So that's another lesson, that I'm learning, and every day I'm just learning more.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it's courageous and inspiring to go through this journey with a learner's mindset and with appreciation, with gratitude, rather than despair and uh, despondedness, if that's a word. I don't know. It's like it's a gift that you're giving a lot of people, and to even just be willing to be on podcasts or to be out in the public sharing your story rather than hiding or feeling sorry for yourself. Not that that's uh, disallowed or not okay or something. It's perfectly understandable if that's what's going on, but that it takes a whole other level of courage to do what you're doing. So my hat's off to you for that.
I was going to think, some people saying, you seem so calm and serene and peaceful. How is that happening? And here's something I realize, always having been the helper, is, and I kind of see you this way also, I don't exist in my present or in my future. What I am is that I'm empathic catalyst for others, helping them go from A to wherever they want to land in their future, helping them get there in whatever way possible. Don't charge for it. I probably mentor 45 people, all free, but I get something from it. The mutual regard is amazing, but literally, I don't exist in my mind in the present. I live to learn, and I live to give. Also, when I think of death, I think I have a glib saying, win, lose, or die, I'm good to go. And part of it is what I really care about is I really don't want to have a lot of pain and suffering. I don't want to be a burden to people. I have a pathological need to not be a burden. That's going to be a problem because people care about me. My family is saying, you're not being a burden. But, if I feel I'm being a burden, I want them to respect my wishes. And then the third thing is tying up loose ends. I'm involved with a number of projects where I'm the creative visionary. I don't do much else, but I want the projects to continue without me. So I'm in the process of making that happen, tying up loose ends, making introductions to appropriate people, and I'm very serene. And I have a condition called MDS, high risk MDS, I think a myelodysplastic syndrome, and it leads to leukemia. And so we're in the process of figuring out meds versus a bone marrow transplant. And, bone marrow transplants apparently have a reasonable success rate, but I have a fair amount of risk factors. And as I read into it, a bone marrow transplant is not a walk in the park.
So have you kind of resigned yourself to dying, or do you hold out hope that this is going to, save you, or you're somehow going to get miraculously healed? Do you have that kind of faith or hope, or are you just like, yeah, this is it. It's terminal. That means this is the end.
I have many, many reasons to live, but I'm okay with dying. I don't want to die. I'd like to live as long as possible, but I'm really okay with it, except for the pain and suffering, being a burden and whatever. And so I don't know if I'm passive or I'm just accepting of it. Here's something else I discovered is, and maybe if you're an entrepreneur, this might apply to you. So I have a real clear vision of what my best shot is to keep from dying or prolong it. And I recently become more and more informed about that and about the timetable. And I've assembled the best possible people. So I'm in contact with the top bone marrow transplant person at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles and the City of Hope. And they're great people. And so I've met with them. They're considering my condition, which is a little bit unusual. I have a few mutations in my bone marrow that are worrisome. I'm involved, but I'm also watching the process happen. I did an episode on hopes versus expectations, disappointment versus devastation. And what I've discovered is too many people focus on expectations that they count on too much, and they don't have a backup plan. And when the expectation doesn't happen and they don't have a backup plan and they count on it too much, they plummet. They often go into depression. But if you have a hope, and I know the saying, hope is not a strategy. You can have a strategy. I have a strategy, but I'm not overly attached to an expectation. So I have a hope. I look at the statistics. I look at the options, and I have great doctors in place. I'm having to ward off. Apparently, there's a bunch of people who care about me, and they say, oh, don't do Western medicine. Oh, you got to try all these supplements. You got to do A, B, and C. And I'll share those with my hematologists who are patient, and they'll tell me how and why those things don't work. So they're not dismissive. They've looked into them and they say that won't work in your condition. So having a clear vision of what a good death would look like or a good life. My real hope is that I don't die and that I hold on to what this is teaching me so that my life can be transformed and lived according to what the prospect of dying is teaching me. And so I'm hopeful of that. And the difference between hope and expectation is when an expectation doesn't happen and you're overly attached, you're devastated. That's part of the plummeting. Whereas when a hope happens and it doesn't happen, you're disappointed. Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, it can hurt for a little bit. It's much easier to shake off a disappointment than a devastation. So I don't know if that tangentially answers your question about, am I rolling over and just being passive? I don't think I'm doing that at all.
Yeah, that certainly wouldn't be the way I would frame it. But this is the reason I ask, because having hope, it actually it's got both aspects, the duality of the lack or the sickness, at the same time as it's wanting things to be better and believes it's possible. I don't know. It feels like there's something here that will be quite useful for you, and it has to do with certainty. Hope and certainty are so drastically different from each other, because certainty, it's like faith. You're sure that this is for your highest and best good, that this is unfolding the way it's meant to, and that it's lead to the most benevolent outcome. Very difficult to have certainty in an uncertain world. This physical plane is designed to be uncertain. That's part of the test. Certainty actually doesn't even really exist in this physical plane. You have to pray for it to get sent to you from the upper worlds, from the higher dimensions. This is my understanding, at least. So I pray for certainty a lot. Not just certainty, but certainty beyond logic, certainty that is bulletproof. I don't want to get swayed by anybody, by any opinions, by any dogma, by any manipulation or propaganda or anything. I just want to be absolutely certain with the things that I'm meant to be certain about. And yeah, it's very, very powerful. So praying for certainty might be something to consider trying.
Well, I'll share something with you. I'm a member of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches. So these are a collection of the top coaches in the world. Marshall Goldsmith is a very well-known executive coach. And we have these Monday calls and, for the community, not unlike Metal having, Saturday meetings. And he'll bring up something, and he often speaks to the elephant in the room. And on a recent call, he talked about impermanence. The reality of the world is that it's impermanent. And so one of the things he threw out at the coaching community, he said, what research shows is often that people who do coaching, it's different than coaching for a sport, and you learn a skill and you want to win and you use that physical skill. He said the evidence shows that in the majority of cases, the coaching only lasts as long as the coach is there to remind the person to keep doing something. And yes, there's all these theoretical things. Yes, well, if you do that long enough, then the coaching can be internalized as a habit and part of your personality. And he says, but the reality is that there's a lot of situations in which someone is a wonderful leader. So one of our members is a wonderful admired, beloved, iconic leader named Alan Mulally. Alan Mulally ran Ford during the Great Recession, and it was the only car company that wasn't bailed out. He came over from Boeing, and he led Ford through that, and he transformed Ford. And his whole approach was actually believing that all the problems and solutions could be identified and solved by just believing in and reaching out to your people. Instead of having to solve it from the top down, he said, we got enough people at Ford. Any problem we have, someone knows what the problem is and someone else knows what the solution is. Let's just keep finding them. And that's what his approach was. And Ford did magnificently. He leaves Ford and it's gone back to its old habits. It's great at what he did. He prevented it from needing to be bailed out. But what Marshall is saying is that Marshall says, I've become much more humble. So when I coach people, my approach is, well, I hope what we talked about that you agree with, that you might try, will last for a day. I'm not against it lasting longer. And Marshall is a philosophical Buddhist. And he says, I'm good with it lasting for a day because human nature is often so inflexible to change. And it's interesting because the coaching industry, all the promises that it makes, and you can look at it. I mean, the coaching industry, especially many of those coaches, they put out book after book after book, and this is the latest, greatest solutions to things. But what happened to your last book that was the greatest solution to things? There's some people that think if people had just stuck with Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People and just kept practicing it and never read another, self-help book, we'd all be good to go. But human nature is people buy something new, they hope it'll work, they try it, it works, then it doesn't work. They feel embarrassment about it, and then they get a new book where they get to try something new. So I found that very refreshing. And Marshall has this way of just rattling people, and I think and it's a good rattle. But getting back to certainty, I think I'm making peace with the impermanence of life. Doesn't mean I'm giving up. And the more I make peace with the impermanence of life, and I'm active. I have a strategy for my illness. I have the right people in place. They're going to do a conference call. They're going to do a case conference on me at City of Hope. So I'll get some of the best minds figuring out, so this is kind of an interesting case. What do we recommend? And then whatever the recommendations are, I'm good to follow.
Do you ever call in angels or divine assistance? Like, let's say there's a meeting happening, like that conference call or in-person meeting, and all these experts are going to be there. Do you believe in angels? Do you, if so, call in their assistance and have, specialists in the room and on your unseen support team assisting these experts, whispering into their consciousness, that still small voice that says, what if you try this modality? What if you tried this drug?
No, look, I know we have slightly different paths, and I'm even envious of the fact that you can call those in. I'll tell you something that I do call in. Like I said something about Michelangelo dying, scrape away what's unimportant, you'll see what's important. I believe in Michelangelo loving and kindness. And then if you scrape away anything that's not loving and not kind, we could heal the world in an instant. So I totally believe in that, and I try to practice being somewhat loving and kind. Some people will say I do a pretty good job of that. So I would call upon, I believe in that, and and I would think to myself, well, when they meet, I hope they all get a little, that they're informed and lifted up by lovingness and kindness. And I'll tell you something that's happening. A lot of these healthcare centers are kind of silos. And I'm fortunate the doctors I now have, they don't have egos, which can be a problem in healthcare, but they are in silos. And so I've been fashioning emails where I send them to all of them. And, and, uh, and I will often say, you have no idea how well I feel I'm being taken care of. What can I do for any or all of you? And so they're all in the emails. And they don't really have relationships with each other, but I'm seeing some of the relationships begin to form, because what will happen is if I address all of them and then someone responds in a kind of loving and kindly way. Like I reached out to them just yesterday because I thought I had a blood clot in my leg, and I thought, oh, great, pulmonary embolism, just what I need. And I said, my internist is out on maternity leave. I really don't know the person who's covering. Could someone order a test to see if I have a blood clot, even if it's not your specialty? I sent that out to them, and within 15 minutes, I get a call from, one of their offices saying, we've scheduled you for, I guess it was an echo or something, or a sonogram of your left leg in an hour. And I was there. And then even the technician, did it, and I'm concerned and I'm feeling pain in my left calf. And she looks at me and she said, well, your doctor's supposed to tell you, but I can't, there's no blood clot. So I immediately send them back an email. All right. It was like, hey, no blood clot. Hooray. Good for us. And I think I can tell it's touching them. And I can tell that, like, I'm not a special anything, but I can tell that what they're thinking is, Mark's a good guy. Let's make sure we figure out how to help him. So maybe I'm the angel. I don't know.
We all are. Yeah, I want to share something that really was profound for me. I learned from studying Kabbalah. It's about miracles. A miracle isn't defined as when the impossible becomes possible. A miracle is defined as removing the illusionary veils that don't allow us to see the light in every experience and moment.
That's Michelangelo. I mean, that's what you're talking about. I mean, okay.
Maybe, but what strikes me about the Michelangelo comment you made earlier is that what's scraping away what isn't important requires a value assessment that may not be accurate, because what I've found is unimportant used to be things like doing dishes, and then it became equally important with sending emails to prospects. And the reason why it's equally important to me now is because I know I'm revealing light in the process of doing it. I'm helping my wife, Orion. I'm being of service. I'm doing something that allows me to meditate and connect with God and with my unseen support team. Whereas if I'm heads down in writing emails, I'm more in kind of the beta brainwave state. So it's almost like, I'll use it as a metaphysical experience rather than just the mundane aspect of washing dishes. So for me, that's no longer unimportant and to be, I don't know, just
Well, look, part of that, Stephan, is I think we have our own language, and hopefully we respect each other's language. Uh, I think what you discovered in the doing dishes is one of Orion's love languages, and it's a vehicle for connecting with her in one of the joyless chores that she would normally just do, and and by doing that, you're connecting with her. So, for instance, I love my wife, and her main love language is acts of service. I mean, I fix a light bulb, and she's really happy to be with me. I try to share one of the ideas. If I tried to share this interview, her eyes would roll over, and she'd say, "I'm trying to stay awake." But the and so it's and see what I'm realizing is the love languages. There's probably a better thing of the people we love, and realizing that trying to impose upon them one of our love languages, that seeing it uh, as their love language and not trying to convert them. Going back to the utter delight thing, one of the things that I'm also doing it with is my wife. Now, my wife and I have a number of annoying habits that annoy each other. And how I'm applying bathe in utter delight is when I look at my wife and she'll be talking about something, or, she'll be worrying about something, a physical thing. And sometimes she'll repeat whatever she's worried about because of her anxiety. Uh, in the past, I would kind of lose patience when I heard it for the second or third time. But now when I'm with her, and I don't know that she's picking it up, I'm looking into her eyes and I'm saying, I don't get tearful. I'm looking into her eyes saying, thank you. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for giving me a home off the range. Because a lot of us creatives, a lot of our left brain people, a lot of our semi-visionary selves, we're not that great at creating a home. We're great at being metaphysical, at being transcendent, at being able to connect dots that nobody else can connect, and that many people in our family don't care about. And so I'm bathing her in the utter delight of thank you for providing me, a kind of weirdo, with a home for over 45 years. Make any sense?
yeah. I guess the thing that is another level for me with doing the dishes, though, that all that makes sense, what you described, and how I'm uh, speaking to Orion's love language and helping her to feel loved and supported. Absolutely. But I was doing that 5 years ago, 8 years ago, when I was doing the dishes then too. I find joy in it now in a way that is different because of my spiritual awakening, where I'm now seeing this as there's a bigger picture here, that I'm living life as best I can, at least, like a prayer. And that includes everything from going to get the mail at the mailbox to doing the dishes to um, just greeting my family when I get in the door, when my wife and son. It all matters. How you do one thing is how you do everything, as the adage goes. And if you have awareness of your awareness in these small things, you'll have more awareness of your awareness in the bigger things too.
Well, okay. So we each have different vocabularies. For me, I would call that I'm finding joy in my utter selflessness. Because when I am utterly selfless, I come from abundance. Uh, When I am all about others, I'm all about everything. Whereas if I start to focus on what's in it for me, what am I going to get from this? How am I going to scale this? How am I going to monetize that? I mean, uh, that's never been my strong suit. I've never been that good at it, and we have enough money, but I never focused on it. But for me, getting back to the utter delight, there's really something in being completely selfless. I was a suicide prevention specialist for 35 years. None of my patients died by suicide. And I think what happened is, I don't know if I bathed them in utter delight, but I bathed them in utter caring, which meant I wasn't checking boxes to fit a protocol, to fit a diagnosis, to fit a treatment. Yeah, I was aware of all that. The two things I focused on, which I think contributed to my being pretty effective, is I wanted to focus on where their hurt was, how deep their hurt was, when was it at their worst, and how much time did we have until it reoccurred and they took their life. And my just focusing on that without diagnosing it, and it would be peculiar because I would listen into their eyes for that, and it was always there. So it would be listening in order to join them in the dark night of the soul and keep them company there, not push them, keep them company there so that they would metaphorically look at me like, what are you doing here? And not pushing them, and just to say, hey, I don't think you should be all alone in this. And they'd start to cry. And when they started to cry, they'd start to drain the pus and the abscess in the dark night of the soul. And I called the process surgical empathy. And then the other thing I would focus on in Michelangelo terms, I knew there was hope in there somewhere. They couldn't see it, but I knew there was hope in there somewhere. And I did my best to carve away what got in the way of that so that they could see it and feel it. Because if a suicidal person can feel hope, they can feel that there's a future for them. And it was very simple. I mean, I think when I share with people, people say, well, that really makes sense. And what's happened is I never scaled it because, researchers in depression and suicide would send me their kids. And I'd say, well, do you have any desire to know how I approach this? They said, well, if it's not evidence-based and you don't have a control group, we can't look at it. So why are you sending me your kid? Why don't you send him to the university? And they'd say, well, we don't have your track record and I'm worried about my kid. And I'd say, are you seeing an inconsistency there? And they say, no. And then I'd just say, send me your kid. I was never focused on building a body of work or scaling it or turning it into the trademark Goulston suicide prevention clinic. And so I think part of the reason I'm doing these, I'm dying to tell you, is I learned a lot that the world needs, but it doesn't want. And I don't care anymore. I'm going to just keep sharing it on podcasts like this and in other places. And if people find it relevant, fine. If people find it not permanent enough, it's too impermanent, what I'm telling them, that's fine too. And I just, and also keeps me alive to share what I've learned. And so that's what I'm doing. And I am so, so grateful to you, for giving me a platform to do that.
You are quite welcome. And I really appreciate you. I also love you. And I will pray for you. And I have been praying for you.
Well, can you accept my loving you? Because you are a little bit of an intellectual. You're a spiritual intellectual.
I do. I accept that and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hey, Stephan, one last thing.
Yeah.
I love you.
Love you too. If there's anything that our listener wants to take from this to kind of take a next step with in terms of some of these lessons you've learned? Where can we send them to so they can watch some of the videos, some of maybe read some of your books and articles and things like that? Where should we send them to?
Well, I hate to marginalize the intimacy of our conversation, but I am pretty current on LinkedIn. And if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, you can find me there. Or people can email me at mgoulston@gmail.com. I don't know what I'm going to do with the I'm Dying to Tell You collection of videos. They'll probably appear somewhere. A publisher wants to just transcribe them and put them into a book, but I'm not pushing for that. And two of my mentees have created a Mark Goulston bot, and that actually, if people reach out to me, I can give them access to that because I have 10 books, 1,200 articles, bunch of appearances. So what my partners have said is you've got a lot of content, so you can ask it anything, and it'll answer in my voice. But reach out to me because we haven't launched yet. And let me ask your opinion. Tell me if this is too cute. They were just going to call it Mark Goulston Bot. But I was thinking of calling it Dr. Mark Lives. The Mark Goulston Bot. Because hopefully it'll be around when I'm not.
I think workshop that some more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I need to. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you've always been a better marketer than me, Stephan.
Yeah. That one needs a minute. That one needs a minute. That's
Okay,
neither
there you go.
option is very good, frankly. But I love the concept. Yeah, we need a better name for it.
Well, nobody knows Mark Goulston, so there you go. Thank you.
That's not true. Don't be afraid to take up space in this world. You are, you have a massive ripple effect, much more than you know.
I hope that's true.
Yeah, it is true. All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you, listener. And get out there and spread some light. And remember, everything here is impermanent except for love. So make it count. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.